Hello, welcome to the Roundtable. We offer you in-depth analysis on current affairs. Please stay tuned. We are today joined by two experts. Professor Kim Hana is back with us. Welcome.
Thanks for having me again.
We are also joined by Professor Choi Hyun-jin. Welcome to the Roundtable.
Good to see you again.
Fubao, the giant panda beloved by Korean people, made a last public appearance on March the 3rd. A huge crowd of people flocked to the zoo to bid farewell to Fubao, who's scheduled to be returned to China in April. The zookeeper, whose nickname is Grandpa Fubao, expressed his appreciation for all the love Fubao fans have shown. Prof. Kim, a little bird told me that you were a fan of Fubao.
I think everyone is a fan, and I love watching Fubao's videos on YouTube. There's definitely a reason why she's called a lucky treasure of Everland.
Definitely. Professor Choi, why is Fubao, need to be back to China? I'm really choking with my emotions. I do not want to let her go back to China.
The Fubao's move back to China is due to an international agreement that comes into play when the giant pandas are lent out to zoos outside China. So Fubao is now classified as endangered animal, and therefore the goal of this agreement is to help preserve giant pandas and also aid the research on their health, behavior, and also the breeding.
Right.
And based on this agreement, so giant pandas are lent out to other countries for 10 to 15 years. And this agreement also has a large annual fee. And the Chinese government uses this money to protect the pandas within their countries. But if babies are born while abroad, these babies must be returned to China before they are old enough to have babies themselves.
I see.
Although it is so sad for us to say goodbye to Fubao, but it is still a part of international cooperation for the protection of endangered animals.
Right. Then the purpose of the protocol is to protect the giant pandas who are on the verge of extinction.
Right. By the way, do you guys know who are RuiBao and HuiBao?
I think the new twin pandas that were recently born.
Oh,
right?
yeah, right.
In Korea.
In Korea, right?
Yeah.
So they are little sister, twin sisters of Fubao. But for the same sad reason, they must be returned to China before turning 4.
I feel like crying, but I like to see the positive side of the story that we still have 2 giant pandas in Korea,
Yeah,
right? Even after the Fubao is going to leave the country. Okay. Right. Before I burst into cry, Professor Kim, it is known fact that the Chinese government has been using these giant pandas as a tool for public diplomacy of China.
Right, so panda diplomacy has been around for a long time, despite the fact that there are less than 2,000 pandas in the world today. And there have been some changes in terms of this diplomacy. So before 1984, China used to gift pandas to friendly countries. But since 1984, China will now lend pandas to other countries and then ask for their return later on, as Professor Choi mentioned. And so we saw this in Korea as well, where after the diplomatic normalization between Korea and China in 1992, China loaned out a panda in 1994. And as of this month, China is now lending out pandas to 16 countries, including South Korea, the United States, and Japan.
I see. Professor, are you fine with this idea of Chinese government using pandas as a tool of public diplomacy? Has Chinese government achieved the purpose of the public diplomacy in terms of gaining more, soft power of China through this diplomacy?
Yes, I think so, because panda serves as a friendly face of China, right, to the global audience.
Right.
And when pandas are sent abroad, they often generate a lot of media attention and public interest. And this helps build a positive image of China as a nation dedicated to protecting wildlife and also willing to share its cultural gems with other countries. So I think such activities can improve how people see China. But more than this, the panda can also serve as a starting point for dialogue on broader issues.
Right.
For example, in the Cold War in 1972, the American President Richard Nixon visited China. It was one of the most dramatic historical events in modern history. That is the tension between the U.S. and China. And during this visit, a pair of panda were given to U.S. as a gift from China, right? And it was the beginning of China's use of panda as for its soft diplomacy.
So panda diplomacy has such a long history since 1970s, and alongside with panda, the other animal which represents the image of China must be a dragon, but unfortunately dragon does not exist, so dragon cannot be rent overseas, and the dragon's image is a little bit too magnanimous, but the tough compared to the furry, soft image of panda. Right? However, there are growing disputes over China's attitude in panda diplomacy recently. As its ties with Washington have soured, Beijing threatened to bring back home all pandas it loaned to the United States zoos. On March 2nd, it recalled a family of 5 pandas from Spain all at once. And then China suddenly announced that it signed agreements with the US and Spain on sending pandas. Professor Kim, what's going on here?
Well, I think part of the reason is what you both mentioned earlier, is that pandas have a lot of both physical and symbolic power, right? And because of their attractiveness and their ability to appeal to a larger audience, people find them very attractive, and as a result of that, China can utilize that, whereas, as you mentioned, a dragon would be very intimidating. But because of that, pandas are considered some of the most capable diplomats, and that's kind of what they're known for. So as Professor Choi mentioned earlier, after Nixon visited China in 1972, pandas were sent right after, and now there's kind of been this exchange depending on how relations between the US and China have developed over time. But just last year, Xi Jinping mentioned that he is trying to renew the panda contract again, which signals that he's trying to work with the US again. Foreign Minister Wang Yi recently mentioned that they're sending a pair of pandas to Spain. Right now, there are 11 pandas in 4 different zoos in the US, and the San Francisco Zoo mentioned recently or announced that a new pair of pandas are going to be joining this summer. And that's the first time China pandas are going to be sent to or loaned to the United States since 2019. So this indicates that relations are potentially getting better through panda diplomacy.
Okay. So, Professor Che, as experts alongside with me, following the global affairs, all we need to do is just pay attention to the movement of panda between the United States and China to gauge the temperature of the bilateral partnership between the two countries, right? But pandas must be very difficult to raise and protect for the receiving countries. Is it kind of burdensome for these receiving countries to, receive and raise pandas?
Yes, it is. The hosting panda does have some significant challenges and responsibilities for the host country. And first, the financial burden of hosting panda is substantial. Countries pay a large annual fee to China when they borrow panda. And also, the panda need a specific diet, as we all know. They only eat bamboo.
Right.
And also, they need the right living condition and also the expert medical care. And this requires a lot of resources and also investment. And lastly, participating in breeding program also requires a significant expertise and investment. And to ensure the health and the well-being of pandas and their babies. And therefore, the countries must weigh the benefit of hosting panda against these challenges. And when they decide to host a panda, they must have a clear understanding of these challenges and also a strong commitment to participating in the global conservation efforts for this so beloved but endangered animal.
Yeah, speaking of sensitivity of receiving and raising pandas, I remember about 5-6 years ago that the very famous idol group member happened to touch the panda, Fubao, with the bare hands. The Chinese internet users went ballistic, like they were going to boycott the insensitive behavior of the K-pop group member and whatnot. So it could be a source of diplomatic rows, not cooperation between the countries.
Yeah, I remember that afterwards, a number of veterinarians came out to explain that a Fubao was safe and that everything was well handled. But I think this, in part, has to do with the fact that the panda symbolizes a national treasure in China, and so for Chinese citizens, especially young Chinese citizens, it seems as though this is going to risk the health of this baby panda, and so that, I think, is part of the reason why they reacted that way. But also, I think this speaks to growing nationalism among young Chinese citizens. After the Tiananmen Square incident in 1989, patriotism has been included in the education in China. And because of that, we're seeing growing patriotism, growing nationalism, and then this potential harm that's going towards this very adorable national treasure. So it seems as though this growing nationalist sentiment is potentially souring relations as well.
Pandas are not the only case of animal diplomacy. It's usual for countries to send rare animals like the kiwibirds in New Zealand and the Siberian tigers in Russia as diplomatic gifts. Here, a question for all of us is to how to balance the purpose of diplomacy for the government and the due protection of these rare and precious animals. What do you think?
Yes, the practice of using animals as a diplomatic gift has some ethical concerns. The main issue is the animals' well-being. And when they are sent to a foreign country from their natural environment, so this can cause some stress and harm to animals, right? Impacting their health and also happiness. And therefore, it is important to ensure that their welfare are properly taken care of in their new home. And based on this concern, we may also need to consider to find some alternative gifts, such as non-living symbolic gifts, technology, or cultural exchanges. This kind of a gift could promote goodwill between countries without causing harm to animals. And therefore, I believe that although using animal as a diplomatic gift can promote some cooperation and friendship between countries, we need to seriously consider their animals' happiness, right? And also try to find some other ways to achieve diplomatic goals.
I completely agree with Professor Choi. As an animal lover myself, I worry about the health.
And you have a puppy, right?
I do. So I completely understand. But, changing the environment for these animals, changing not just the weather, the food, the caretakers, everything around them can be very stressful, and it can take a long time for these animals to adjust. So even for Fubao, who was born in Korea, she's lived in Everland her entire life. She's used to a particular bamboo that her zookeeper provides for her, and her zookeeper, the grandfather of Fubao, is also not going to be with her anymore. So I am concerned in that sense. So as Professor Choi mentioned, an alternative would be, some type of object or non-living thing. Maybe, as you mentioned, a dragon or a model or something like that could be a better alternative.
It remains to be seen whether or not China will continue to enhance its clout over other countries through panda diplomacy. Let's move on to the next topic. Recently, there are reports about slowing demands for this product. Let's take a look at the video first.
Apple called time on its electric car project, which had been widely seen as potentially transformative for the electric vehicle industry. Apple abandoned decade-long efforts to build an electric car with self-driving abilities, launched in 2014. Mercedes-Benz delayed its electrification goal by 5 years. Other carmakers also postponed or scrapped investment plans for electric vehicles. US electric car startups, once booming and glowing with ambition to become a next Tesla, are struggling amid sagging demand for electric vehicles. the global electric vehicle market is forecast to grow 19% compared to the previous year. This is a dismal performance compared to its peak growth at 109% in 2021. Skepticism is growing over the future of the industry. In response to the decreasing demand, most EV companies are adjusting the speed of business. However, China's BYD is aggressively expanding its business. BYD sold the largest number of electric cars in the world in the fourth quarter of last year, overtaking Tesla. Having grown on China's vast domestic market, BYD has been expanding in the Southeast Asian and European markets with cheaper models. The Chinese plug-in electric car manufacturer plans to enter the Korean market soon. Chinese automakers are taking the world by storm with electric vehicles. Will they be able to breathe new life into the struggling EV market?
We review the electric car industry, whose growth stays stagnant lately. Let's hear more details from an industry expert. We have on a video call Professor Kim Pil-soo of the Division of Automotive Engineering at Daerim University College. 김 교수님, 전기차 판매가 왜 이렇게 감소세를 보이는지, 그렇다면 우리가 기대했던 전기차 시대는 벌써 막을 내리는 건 아닌지 말씀 부탁드리겠습니다.
네, 작년 후반부터 전기차 판매가 주춤하기 시작했습니다. 물론 글로벌 시장에 비해서 국내 시장이 더 많이 감소됐다고 볼 수가 있는데 전체적으로 하이브리드 자동차 같은 모델에 비해서 가성비가 떨어지기 때문에 전기차 판매가 주춤했다고 볼 수가 있습니다. 가성비 하게 되면은 전기차 가격이 내연기관차 대비해서 약 2배 정도 고가고요. 또 충전 인프라도 부족하고 또 충전 전기비도 가격이 계속 올라가고 있고 또 전기차 화재 등 부정적인 요소가 강화되다 보니까 이런 전체적인 가성비가 하이브리드 자동차 같이 안정된 모델에 비해서 떨어지고 있다는 게 가장 큰 이유라고 볼 수가 있습니다. 그렇다고 이 기간이 오래 가지는 않습니다. 전기차나 이 수소차 같은 무공해차에 대한 보급은 필연적이고 의무화되어 있기 때문에 특히 이제 문제점에 대한 각 분야의 경착륙에 대한 것들을 교정을 하면서 이 가성비가 높아지는 이런 계기로 삼는다는 거기 때문에 약 3년, 4년 이후에는 전기차 판매가 훨씬 더 올라가면서 주도권을 쥐는 주도 세력으로 등장할 가능성이 높은 게 전기차라고 볼 수가 있습니다.
예, 말씀 감사합니다, 김 교수님. That was Professor Kim Pil-soo. Professors, what do you think?
There are not enough charging stations in my neighborhood. Right? To use an electric car, we need to charge it.
Right.
And there are about 40,000 charging stations around the country.
In entire South Korea?
In entire South Korea,
40,000.
40,000 charging stations. But only about 2,000 of these are fast charging stations. Or sometimes it's not easy to find a charging spot where they want. This problem, I think, make electric cars less appealing and negatively affect their value in the used car market.
Right. So in the United States, we've seen a surge in sales, especially in areas like California, because there are more available charging areas. And because of that, I think that plays a huge role in increasing its sales and increasing its value. I think also at the same time, the price point is also a big concern for a lot of people, especially because electric vehicles are so new and there's limited information about how long they can last for a lot of people. So for everyday citizens, if they're considering that price point along with the lack of charging areas and lack of information, we can see why the momentum is kind of declining. But as Professor Kim mentioned earlier, I do think that it's too big of a market to completely fail. So we're definitely going to see sales go up later on.
A study recently shows that popularity of electric cars are slowing down in most countries, except for China. In particular, in the United States, just 6% of car buyers prefer electric cars, while 67% prefer gas-powered ones with an internal combustion engine. So automakers around the world are cutting back on their production of EVs. However, with aggressive marketing strategies, Chinese car makers are now on track to dominate the global EV market. BYD is even planning to advance into the Korean market this year. Professor Che, remember when we talked about the penetration of the Chinese e-commerce platforms
Yes, I
into the South
remember.
Korean market?
Yes.
Are we going to see the similar phenomenon of the BYD coming to car markets in South Korea?
Yes, I think so. As Professor Kim just mentioned, the value for money,
Value for money.
value for money is so important. So the BYD's recent model, the Seal, how much it is? Do you know that? It's only $9,700.
Wow. I can just go out and buy one right now, right?
The BYD is the only major automobile company in the world that can produce electric cars for less than $10,000. So this is because BYD can make most parts used for electric cars themselves,
I see.
including battery, software, and semiconductor. And that's why the sales of a BYD car have skyrocketed since last year. And furthermore, the BYD has announced that it will reduce its battery price 10% more in the first half of this year and another 10% in the second half. Because batteries are about 40% of the electric car price. So this means that the BYD can lower its electric car price even more.
Even more.
And that's why I guess Korean car drivers are going to buy more Chinese electric cars in the near future.
I see. But Professor Kim, considering both the commitment of the European and American automakers and consumers for better environment, as well as the conservation of energy, and the rise of the Chinese automakers' sale in the global car market, then I don't think European countries and the United States will not be doing any response to these challenges.
Maybe not directly, but we can imagine that there might also be some more affordable electric vehicles that come out in the future, some that may be competitive with those in the Chinese market. And also, as I mentioned earlier, just creating more awareness about electric vehicles in general. Since it is an environment-based issue, I think emphasizing that. Also, in the case of the United States, electric vehicles tends to be a politically polarizing issue.
Right.
And I think kind of de-emphasizing that aspect of it and emphasizing more of the environment aspect of the vehicles may also be helpful. But most importantly, I think the price point and the availability would be very helpful.
Right. It's very indicative that the Biden administration suddenly reduces the commitment and the assistance for the EV industry in the time of presidential election in order to capture the minds of the voters in the state of Michigan or in the state of Georgia, whose prosperity depends upon the traditional automobiles as opposed to EVs.
Yeah, studies have actually shown that liberal citizens are more likely to buy more environmental friendly cars, whereas conservative citizens are more likely to buy big trucks. And so kind of trying to find a middle ground there might be helpful as well.
Professor Che, what's the recommendation for the South Korean government and industry in response to these challenges?
I think we need to take some key steps to make ourselves more competitive. The first recommendation is more investment for research and development for advanced technology. This technology includes battery and also semiconductor to create electric vehicles with better performance and longer range and also shorter charging time than our competitors.
I see.
And secondly, we need to work together with the local governments and private sector to expand charging station and especially fast charging ones. And lastly, we need to secure and diversify the global supply chain for the most important parts of electric cars, including semiconductor and also battery. And for this, we need to increase our domestic investments for production and also forming strategic alliances with other countries. I think these are the things we need to do to succeed in the global market.
Professor Kim, any comments on South Korea's choices?
I completely agree with Professor Choi, and I think it's very important to invest more in R&D regarding electric vehicles and also providing more technological innovation regarding electric vehicles and batteries, but also focusing on policy coordination with the government and relevant industries regarding these electric vehicles are also going to be important.
As you mentioned, that for the long-term potential, South Korea has to secure the infrastructure.
Right.
After enjoying an explosive growth, the electric car market is now stalling. All eyes are on how it will transform after overcoming this slump. Professors, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you very much.
This is all we have for you today. We'll be back next week with more latest topics. Thanks for watching and goodbye.